On this edition of Fed Gov Today with Francis Rose, building security into your agency's operations. A CX shot in the arm comes from an unexpected source, and the building blocks for a winning cloud strategy at CBP. It's Wednesday, July 31st, 2024. Welcome to Fed Gov Today with Francis Rose, sponsored by Presidio Federal and IBM. New guidance to overhaul FedRAMP is out from the Office of Management and Budget. OMB Director Shalonda Young writes the guidance, quote, is responsive to developments in federal cybersecurity and substantial changes to the commercial cloud marketplace that have occurred since the program was established. One of the changes Director Young refers to there is the emergence of the multi-cloud model. Beau Houser is Chief Information Security Officer at the Census Bureau. Beau, it's great to talk to you again. Thanks very much for your time today. You built a multi-cloud environment at the Census Bureau. How did you approach building it? What was your role in doing that as the CISO to make sure that security was built into it as you developed it? Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Francis. Our CIO was really the key in our current cloud strategy, and we're taking an aggressive approach. Now we have all of the three major clouds at Census, AWS, Azure, and Google Cloud, and we have various other software as a service offerings that we leverage as well. So it's pretty complex. We also have a data center. We have field offices across the country, so it's a pretty complex technology stack overall. But the CIO felt like it was a great opportunity for us to try to consolidate a lot of our IT across the Bureau. And so we came up with the cloud as our sort of impetus to drive in that direction, drive technology consolidation, modernize as well. And so he's a very, very avid proponent of cybersecurity. And so it really enabled me to make sure that security was a key part of those initiatives.
In that consolidation effort, does that consolidation effort make your job as the CISO easier, more difficult, stay the same? Because it sounds like although you have a lot of moving parts there, they're kind of categorized. Maybe I'm not looking at this right, Beau, but they're maybe categorized into buckets that, you know, you have this stuff with this cloud, you have this stuff with this cloud, and this stuff with this cloud. Is that a fair, am I getting it right, or am I kind of off?
You're right, but luckily a lot of the cloud service providers and a lot of vendors in general are embracing more open source approaches, right? Open standards and standard protocols and so forth. And so the interoperability between the clouds is getting better and better, and that's a huge benefit. And so I would say that we're working towards it being simpler. But of course, the devil's in the details, as you know, so there's nothing trivial about this at all.
Yeah, I wonder what the level of simplicity is that you can introduce, because by nature, the way you described it, there's a lot of, like, as I said, a lot of moving parts, it sounds like. And I imagine you can only get it so simple as you try to devolve the complexity.
I'll give you an example of one thing that we did that was very successful. We had an on-prem enterprise logging solution. There were in the neighborhood of 50 servers involved in that implementation. And so part of our cloud migration allowed us to leverage a cloud native software as a service offering for our enterprise logs. And so now we're at 2.6 terabytes of ingest daily directly into the cloud. It's coming from AWS, it's coming from Google Cloud, it's coming from our data centers, and it's all aggregated into the cloud. So we got rid of those 50 servers, so all of that maintenance went away. But now we're subject to software as a service, and we saw with the CrowdStrike issue that, you know, that could be problematic sometimes. But so it's a trade-off between the simplicity that we gain from using native cloud services, software as a service, versus that dependency that we have now on that provider.
To that end, Beau, what are the keys in your view to securing or ascertaining the security of, as best you can, software as a service applications?
Well, you saw probably there was a new OMB memo released related to FedRAMP. And so FedRAMP is really leaning in now to to simplify and to increase efficiency while achieving that required security level that the government needs. So that's a big part of it. The other part at the agency level is really just gaining that visibility. And again, this is another area where cloud service providers are building the tools into their products that illuminate the status. We're currently using a lot of those tools in AWS to make sure that our business ecosystem there is very resilient and very secure. And again, we're feeding that into our enterprise security in Azure for the SOC visibility of that and the rest of the enterprise. So yeah, you got to have visibility of it, but the vendors know that too, right? Cloud service providers know better than anybody that if their services are defective or compromised, they take a big hit.
Yeah,
so they take it very seriously. Luckily,
their names are getting attached to it, and the awareness of their brands is just as high as the awareness of the federal agency brand, maybe higher in some cases.
Absolutely, yes.
Where would you say that the Census Bureau is on its zero trust journey, Beau? A lot of discussion around zero trust on the civilian side. The DoD has a pretty clear direction, obviously, with the way that the civilian side of the government is separated. That's a little more difficult to track. So where are you in Census, and how do you fit into where the zero trust journey is going for the Commerce Department as a whole?
Yeah, I think DoD is leading this space as far as things go in the government. But lucky for us, the Department of Commerce has created a really aggressive plan for zero trust as well. Part of their plan is collaboration among all of the bureaus within the Department of Commerce to develop sort of the roadmap. So we've had the opportunity to participate to bring in a industry-leading identity service. So we've got that underway. We've got other services around CDN and WAF capabilities, SASE services. We're working on that as well. And again, it's cloud-based. And so it's another example of where these cloud service providers are helping to move us forward and simplifying the implementation and so forth. And so we're making progress across that spectrum. I think the primary focuses are on SASE right now to really move away from our on-prem VPN to that cloud-based comms model, the secure access service edge model. So we're on the path. We're on the march.
Do you have personally zero trust goals for the Census Bureau beyond what was laid out in the executive order, or are you using the EO as your kind of timeline guide, Beau?
That's obviously a driver. That's external pressure, and it's a good thing. It's helping agencies really prioritize and push. At the Census Bureau, we know that that data is our lifeblood, right? We're all about the data, and we're also dependent on the voluntary cooperation of the public in many instances to get that data. And we know that our reputation leads the way. So we are all about protecting the data at the Census Bureau, again, to maintain our reputation and to really, maintain the trust of those that share their information with us.
And mentioning data actually leads me to where I wanted to go next, which is, given the posture and the status that Census has as a data collector for like 250 years, what has that meant as data has become more important to agencies all across the federal government? Have you had folks coming to you at other agencies and saying, okay, data protection now is a big thing for my agency. It's always been a big thing for Census. What are you doing and what can we learn from you? Is that something that's happened a fair amount, Beau?
There's collaboration for sure. There's a lot of collaboration among all statistical agencies. And so that's something where we're the largest. And so we welcome those opportunities to collaborate with the rest of that community. And we've done some stuff there to help prepare for the Evidence Act, which is being implemented now, where we want to do evidence-based policy making. which makes a lot of sense. And then we're also navigating these confidentiality requirements that we have too in that context. So there's a lot of collaboration for a bunch of different reasons. CISA and other entities, they need to help us as well. We need to figure out how to work with them while maintaining that confidentiality. So there's a lot of collaboration for that.
As you look out over the next couple of years, 5 years out, for where you see your security posture, Beau, what are the markers, again, either including or above and beyond the Zero Trust EO, what are the markers that you will use to determine that the Bureau's on the path, that is executing on the path that you would like it to execute upon?
Yeah, I think that AI will play a very central role in cybersecurity, no question about it. The other area that I think will be well on its way is quantum cryptography, right? So we want to make sure our crypto remains secure in the face of advancements in computing technology.
Beau, it's great to talk to you as always. Thanks very much for your time today.
Thank you, Francis.
You can read more about security at Census in today's show notes at fedgovtoday.com. I'm Francis Rose, the host of Fed Gov Today. The cloud security that Beau Houser talked about building at Census and in collaboration with other statistical agencies contributes to another important executive branch priority. Agency leaders tell me just about all of the customer experience enhancement applications they use live in the cloud. Philip Carruthers is cyber domain strategy leader for IBM Public Sector. Presidio Federal and IBM sponsored this edition of Fed Gov Today. Philip, welcome. It's great to talk to you. Thanks for joining me today. What is the intersection that you see of the citizen services that agencies are talking about delivering, and especially with an improved customer experience lineup, and the data security importance, the data security challenges that we're talking about on this program today? Welcome, Philip.
Yeah, thanks, Francis. Thanks for having me today, and thanks for putting this together. When you're working with your utility companies, and when you're working with your banks, and when you're working with all of the different people that you work with daily, and then you sit back and contemplate your relationship with federal agencies, and whether it's with if you're in the military service and your relationship with VA, or you're getting services from Medicare or Medicaid, or whether you're getting services from the post office, and the list goes on, taxes, Census Bureau, certainly your federal loans, and the like, then you consider that they're all one-off relationships right now. They're all in various states of incomplete relationships, building every day to make them better. And there isn't one place that you can go, although login.gov is hypothetically that future place where you can go to start to build and build a relationship with the federal government. And then if you get all that built out, then there's, of course, the citizen services side, but then there's also the back office side. And you have to be concerned about the well-being of your personal data that you're giving to the government. And a lot of people are, a little bit questionable about how much information they're giving to the federal government and whether they really want to do that or not. It should be a trusted relationship. It should be a relationship that you can openly have with the federal government when you're trying to consume their services. It should be a full trusted relationship. And so I just think that that's our future. That's what we'd love to see the government get their wagons hitched around and get that working. And we'd love to see it in a secure and some, now with AI coming on the scene, we'd love to see AI enhanced services around that as well.
We'll talk about AI in a minute, Philip, but you wrote recently, it's time for citizen services by federal agencies to come to life in an integrated, secure, and consistent fashion. What are the steps that you see that agencies need to take to move from wherever they are today to that vision that you outline, that integrated, secure, consistent fashion of delivery of citizen services?
Well, the first thing I'd like to see is them create, sort of a universal services branch that figures out what it should look like, and works with the different agencies to create some degree of uniformity around it. And then, and then as each agency begins to build out their services, they need to obviously do it again in a trusted, automated but secure fashion. And I need to be able to have a secure relationship with them. So obviously, with Zero Trust coming on and being implemented across the government landscape, that has both internal and external implications associated with it. And a lot of the focus right now is just on the basic internal workings of that, and what we need to see that on both the internal and the external services as we move forward.
You mentioned Zero Trust. A lot of agencies are moving towards Zero Trust, but my sense is that most of the focus of that has been internal for federal agency employees. What's the implication of the Zero Trust movement, policy, whatever you want to call it, for the average citizen that will interact with a federal agency, Philip?
Well, I think that the services have to be extended beyond from the agency's internal systems, and then as they look at external systems, they need to be created fundamentally with those same secure capabilities to allow for interaction, with whether it's data security, personal data security, as well as identity security, being two key pillars of that as we move forward.
You said before we went on the air that artificial intelligence is like 1982 all over again with the personal computer. What do you mean by that? And what is the implication of that? Because everybody, I think, understands how revolutionary the PC was in not just the federal government, but in society as a whole. So what's the connection? What's the analogy that you see there that makes you think that, Philip?
Well, I think we've reached a point where everything's born digital. For the last many decades, it's been a march to creating the digitized versions and launching services. Nowadays, I think when we launch new services, we launch them with the iPhone or with the smartphone in mind, as the primary interface device, which is good. But now, from recent times, that we're now putting a layer of artificial intelligence wrapped around that, and we're just at the very beginning of all of the potential of AI, and so we've got literally decades looking forward where AI can be harnessed to improve and enrich those services, but it has to be done in a trusted way. It has to be done securely. It has to be done where we trust the interaction, and where that interaction isn't perhaps going off and doing something that we didn't want it to do or didn't intend it to do.
You wrote recently also, the complexities of this challenge, the challenge you just referred to, is no longer something agencies can organically create. Have they been trying to organically create it or just waiting for it to grow on its own? And if so, how do you see that transition playing out? How does an agency build a strategy to move to that type of deliberate, intentional creation or sustenance of that kind of an infrastructure that works for the citizen, works for the agency moving forward?
I just think of where we've been and where we're going. And where we've been, was implementing computers. They were somewhat well-defined. We had operating systems on top of them. We have applications on top of them. Most of that we generally understand, and it's been what I'll call a technology that had confined perimeters. The problem you have with AI, and the challenge we have with AI, is that it represents this somewhat boundless potential. And so runaway freight trains is what comes to mind with that. And we don't really have the guardrails well defined. There's not a lot of baselines well defined at this point. Certainly in government, that's all the work that the good work that NIST is doing, and is well on their way to trying to establish those guidelines and baselines. But that there's still a lot of work to be done there. And I think that it's going to be ongoing. I don't think they're going to get to anything anytime soon that says, hey, we've solved the problem and here's the guardrails and this is all we need to worry about. I think it's a spiral, an upward spiral. We see them all the time in the information technology world, the digital world, is that we solve one problem and then we've got a new set of problems and we've got to define the guardrails around that. And then we got to spiral up further. And that's just literally decades looking out as we move forward. The complexity of that is now at a level that I don't think agencies can just hire and expect to staff the people necessary to think that through. I think that is something that they're going to need to reach out to the greater IT community here in certainly in the Beltway region and around the country and around the world, and continue to bring those people in and continue to create programs that fund them and have them doing specific work around securing creating the large language models and then securing them and then ensuring that all that technology is doing all the things that we want it to do.
One of the methodologies that agencies are using to try to, I think, provide a little bit at least of governance or guardrails or whatever you might want to call it around AI and automation tools is positioning them as digital twins or assistants or that kind of thing. Is that at least a starting point in your view that makes sense for the way that you help not just the agencies as an enterprise, but the individuals within the agencies who are using these tools or potentially affected by these tools to kind of wrap their arms around what's coming?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you've just got to go, cautiously and in some baby steps to get some successes and prove that we can do this in a trusted way, in a way that makes both sides of both the citizens and the government comfortable that things are going well, and then build upon it. We still need basic definition to get established, and hopefully that's forthcoming. But then I think that we can start to implement, helpful bots that can help us navigate our way through, and that obviously has the reduction of human capital associated with it that we're going to need in order to employ it. But I do think that certainly is a good starting point.
Philip, it's great to have you on the program. Thanks very much for your time today.
Terrific. Thank you, Francis.
You can read more in today's show notes at fedgovtoday.com. Customs and Border Protection's almost 2 years into its most recent IT strategic plan. The CIO at CBP, Sunny Bagwalia, includes core enterprise cloud computing as one of the objectives of that strategic plan. Mark James is Executive Director of the Enterprise Cloud Services Division at CBP. Mark, welcome. It's great to talk to you. How did the agency approach establishing and evolving a multi-cloud environment? Welcome.
Thank you, sir. But like many other agencies, we were basically focused, on a lower cloud tier, whether it be for our email or our IT service delivery or service catalog, things such as problem and incident management. We started building out cloud access points in preparation for our journey into the cloud. Our journey was kind of a phased or tiered approach. As we migrated in, we started to utilize some of the wider options of cloud for resilience and reliability, things such as AI, ML, things such as Kubernetes and cloud options. Some of the cloud providers became proficient, and we could choose services based on their performance features, cost tailoring to specific needs. Public and private clouds was a big topic for us, back when we started, which one FedRAMP was important to a federal agency, but we wanted to avoid vendor lock-in, and we also wanted to, have a lot of data control and reduce reliance on single cloud providers.
Was the discussion about public versus private cloud an either or was it dependent on the application or the data that you were storing? How did you kind of establish what went where and so on?
Well, initially we started off as only FedRAMP applications would migrate in. That was kind of our key, stake in the ground in terms of migrating in. Public versus private. A lot of our applications were, either high or moderate level. We use that, that FISMA ID or that security stance to decide which platform we want to. I will ensure that initially, and for most of the CBP applications, we align to a FedRAMP High model. So public and private cloud, as long as we balance in with that, including our SaaS offerings, that's kind of how we made those decisions back 2 or 3 years previously.
I don't suggest that security is easy because everybody knows it's not, but I imagine the FedRAMP High decision at the beginning made then your application decision process easier, at least, because if it met it, if the application met that criteria, great, and if it didn't, also fine, you could move on to the next thing. Is that a fair read on my part?
That is a fair read. What we also recognized were couple of our applications required a FedRAMP High, and it was minimal effort on the cloud provider to actually bring us up to that particular level.
And that kind of takes me where I wanted to go next, which is what kind of response did you get from the community, from the industry community that you dealt with about the way that you had it sounds like you kind of had a checklist and said, here's what we're looking for, and if you can help us, great. Kind of just what I just alluded to about the individual applications.
Yeah, what's interesting about that, especially between public and private cloud, the FedRAMP discussion, whether it be high, low, moderate, was kind of challenging initially. So the CSPs or cloud service providers is almost as if they were unfamiliar with this type of terminology, except in regards to their public cloud, right? So if it was dealt with government cloud, they knew how to do the security controls. If it was their private cloud, there was a little bit of back and forth on, aligning to some of the security controls. So what we infused our security organization into the cloud service providers, and it was a joint effort to actually migrate and make them compliant with some of the applications within CBP.
You talked about how you started this journey, I think you said 2 or 3 years ago. There have been some pretty big building blocks that have come along, some of them policy, like a zero trust executive order since you began this journey. Some of them just the nature of the evolution of technology. You made a reference to artificial intelligence earlier, and generative AI certainly is a great topic of discussion among federal agencies. How do you see in hindsight that you built this infrastructure in order to be able to accommodate things that you weren't expecting when you built it, and yet you did, as you referenced earlier, wanted to build something that was resilient in addition to being reliable, so that you did have flexibility as time went on?
Yeah, so it's interesting because our zero trust journey, of course, the mandate came out in 2022, I believe, January 2022 OMB, but our journey started well before that. Our cyber awareness at the DHS level was, pushed down into the component level, which made our journey into zero trust a little bit easier. Surprisingly enough, one of our first supporters or migrations into cloud was zero trust structure, whether it be the network layer. We build cloud access points to make us a little bit resilient for awareness. And then also our identity management suite of, that the front end was one of our first adoptions of cloud providers. So we had a CBP's CIO, Sunny Bagwala, stood up a strong zero trust organization within his cybersecurity director. He also it's a program level. So we align to the 7 pillars of CISOs and everyone else's pillars of zero trust. But CBP, what we've done is we centered around data, because we understand that data is the current and the future. I mean, things such as AI and post-quantum, which we can get into a little bit later, is just a form of zero trust as well. So our journey started years back, probably at least 7 years prior. We just now are calling it the Zero Trust Journey as OMB mandated.
You've been doing the stuff since before it had a name, it sounds like.
Yes, sir.
What are the implications of those technologies that you just mentioned, like AI and post-quantum, and maybe even stuff we don't know about yet, as we didn't really think about generative AI 3 years ago? What are the implications of those technologies for the things that you're doing today and how you're trying to keep what you've built resilient enough to accommodate what you want to do moving forward in a secure way?
So one of the keys of the zero trust architecture is visibility and automation. So we want to augment our user community or our workforce community to utilize AI to support the zero trust strategies. I mean, a human cannot capture or identify every anomaly, whether it's in some data or threat detection. We receive billions of threats on a weekly basis. We are heavily utilizing AI for that. Post-quantum, CBP stood up one of the first post-quantum tests to ensure that our cryptography was up to date. It was that we would be able to address some of that. So Zero Trust aligns with us in terms of AI and ML. AI and ML are just forms of data. And CBP's Zero Trust strategy is centered with data with the other pillars surrounding it.
I was in Seattle a couple of weeks ago for the National Contract Management Association World Congress. And as I was leaving the airport to go to the hotel, I saw a sign for the CBP office at the airport in Seattle. And in anticipation of this conversation, I thought, you have at CBP edge computing capacity, basically the same way that the Department of Defense talks about edge computing capacity. You have people, it's obviously no federal agencies concentrated in Washington, but you have really important mission delivery access points all across the country, all around the world. What is the implication for that on the things that we've talked about in this conversation for the way that you've got to deliver not just cloud computing capacity, but the applications that live in the cloud that a CBP officer has to use at the airport in Seattle or at an airport somewhere around the world or at whatever other location they're doing meeting the mission of the agency at, Mark?
Yeah, so interesting enough, CBP has always been somewhat of an edge computing environment, similar to ZTA. We just never called it a edge computing environment. Every port of entry, every border crossing, all that is edge computing. The officers, the OFO field officers, Joe Public, everyone who comes in and out of the country has ever been able to use the CBP systems. Traditionally, that resided in a legacy data center. That data center was controlled, your network, you were firewalled in, and that was your defense mechanism. Now, as things have moved out further to the edge, and we want the application and application level support closer to the user community. That means our defense strategies, our security strategies have to be further out. We have to have security protocols, defense mechanisms for networking, automation, monitoring, out at the edge as well. And cloud computing has enabled us to be able to support that, along with some of the cyber technologies and cyber software that's available out there to actually see visibility into those edge environments. One such as CBP One is a great example of, and it's into the hands of the individuals, utilizing the system. That is something that we need to ensure from a CBP OIT, Office of Information Technology perspective. We have to ensure that is secure in a manner that is defensible, just as if it was in a traditional data center.
Does having the cloud infrastructure that we've been talking about in this conversation make your overall operational position easier since you have lighter infrastructure footprints at places like Seattle and others? Or does it make it more difficult because all of that's happening at an enterprise level and you have to make sure that the enterprise architecture can support all of these different places? Or maybe I'm not even thinking about it the right way, Mark.
Yeah, so we've actually put out a couple of mandates and policies related to infrastructure and architecture in the field, and that our organization would lead the CBP and other organizations in terms of building out systems out in the field. So enterprise architecture is a legacy term that I reference a little bit, but from a cloud perspective, it's made our job quite easy. We can build efficient, fast systems within minutes, days. I mean, systems that used to take weeks, months, even years are completed within a month or days or weeks. Now, the challenge is as well, it is just as fast stood up. How do we secure it? How do we ensure that those security protocols go within those deliveries as well? And pushing these things out to the cloud has enabled application developers and or citizens to do a lot of development on their own. So really governance and management around to the user community, because cloud's a little bit of a different animal, so to speak, for developing applications, because prior to that, it was more of an in-house environment. Now, your Seattle office can actually develop applications in the cloud. We offer those capabilities out to the field mission offices where we couldn't reach them before in a rapid manner.
Final thought, what would you tell somebody that was starting on this journey to do the same as you did because it worked really well, or to do differently, not because it didn't work well, but because you learned something through the process that worked better? So
total buy-in from organization. We had definitely CIO buy-in, which led the troops into the right direction. But governance is usually a bad word in federal government space. But from our perspective, we were able to set a lot of policy, a lot of direction for our organization and how we build it. I will also say know your assets. Tagging, technologies such as tagging or data identification go a long way when you're trying to build out systems into cloud, including multi-cloud.
Mark James, great to talk to you. Thank you very much for joining me today. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, sir.
You can read more about CBP's cloud strategy on today's show page at fedgovtoday.com. I know you're really busy and you might not catch all the podcasts and TV shows Fed Gov Today offers you. If you want to keep up with everything that we're putting out, you can follow us on LinkedIn to get the latest updates. You'll get the next Fed Gov Today podcast next Wednesday. Till then, thanks very much for listening.